Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, let's uncover some stuff. Let's get deep and uncover some interesting facts, and perhaps lead some people to a deeper realization of what's been going on here for a very, very, very long time, and how things piece together. This is Genesis 6, which is so famous. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I made him. And then it goes into the Noah story and the flood. So I just, sometimes, it gets a little bit perhaps frustrating when people will only look at one little thing and they won't go deep and actually do some comparative study. Because when you do some comparative study, there's a very clear picture that emerges. And, people don't want to know, don't want to feel, don't want to think that, it's painful to think that everything you were taught is just wrong. A lot of things are lies. A lot of things are cover-up. A lot of things are blatantly wrong in order to control your mind and your heart. And in order to basically keep you, for lack of a better word, in a form of slavery. And as we've seen, mankind's history has been one of conquest and slavery and war all the time, going back throughout our history that we have recorded. This go-round, there have been many other go-rounds, and we don't know exactly what those look like. But we could see what we have gotten in modern times. And, this is going back to the times of Sumeria that we are talking about. So another one that's great and always hit me was Deuteronomy 32:8. When the Most High, talking about God, or, one of the gods, gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. So God has sons. That's interesting. When we look back over here, the giants were created, and they were mighty men of old, men of renown. So that sounds good, doesn't it? They were mighty men of old, men of renown. Is that a bad thing? But then all of a sudden it turns and it changes and it becomes a negative. So as we've said before, the Bible is Cliff Notes. The Bible is not complete. It's the Reader's Digest super condensed version that has been sanitized. It's the sanitized document you get from the CIA, where all the good stuff is taken out, because the good stuff will give you a different picture, and a picture that won't be able to be used to control you. We know from the Sumerian texts, of which, there's far more now than what we have of the Bible in its entirety. And coincidentally, the King James Bible, 66 books. 66, that's an interesting number. So, a lot of people are afraid of 666. And, all this stuff is indoctrination, and basically it's made to create fear in us. So when we look at Utnapishtim, the legend of the Sumerian Noah, it gets into it in a little bit more detail. And it's also way predating the Bible again. So in this, it explains that Enlil is the one really that decided, hey, we're not going to let them know there's going to be a flood. And many believe it was basically the end of the ice age, and it was the poles basically melting. Some think it was something that came in and perhaps exploded like a comet or a big asteroid hitting around Greenland and causing a massive flood. There's different speculation on this, and some think that maybe they shot some sort of weaponry and did it on their own, according to the stories that we have here. Either way, the hearts of the great gods moved them to inflict the flood. Their father Anu uttered the oath of secrecy. Now, Enki warns the Sumerian Noah, tear down the house and build a boat. Interesting times we're in now. We need boats. Abandon wealth and seek living beings. Spurn possessions and keep alive living beings. Make all living beings go up into the boat. Enki also provides the dimensions for the craft. When the boat is finished, everyone who is to be saved is loaded. All living beings I have loaded on it. I had all my kith and kin go up into the boat, and the beasts and the animals of the field and the craftsmen I had go up into it. So it's interesting too. And is it a real boat? Is it a real boat? Or is it something different as well? Giant footprints around the world. There is most definitely a ton of evidence as we look at these photos of giant footprints around the world. There's actually been thousands of bodies of giants recovered that mysteriously go missing after the Smithsonian gets their hands on them. And there are just countless cases of this all around the entire globe. And varying sizes too, from giants that would probably be anywhere from 8 to 12 feet tall to some being as tall as maybe 36 feet. It's fascinating, but there is tons of evidence to this. And this is the Sumerian Kings list. And so this is circa 2119 BC, so vastly predating anything biblical. So the flood swept over the land. After the flood had swept over the land, and kingship had descended from heaven for a second time. Kish, or Kush, became the seat of kingship. So kingship comes down from heaven. It's given to us from the gods. As we see Sumerian depictions of Anunnaki gods flying in their whirlwinds. Look at this, right? Circle and wings, circle and wings, circle and wings. Very, very interesting symbols that we see. And it's not just the Sumerians. We see that in many other places as well. Giant human footprint, fossilized in rock, discovered in China. And you see there's tons of these. And we have legends of giants all around the globe. Do you think it's all mass hallucinations? Is this all just nothing but fairy tales? Do you really believe there's no substance to this? You're seeing all over Spain, Sri Lanka, Paraguay, Bangalore, Botswana, Texas, Australia, Thailand, Canada, New Mexico, Russia, Alaska, Syria, Belize, Cleveland. Oh yeah, up in Ohio, there's a lot of those very interesting mounds. So are these our ancestors, or what are these? And when we talked about the Paracas skulls down in Peru, and the fact that they didn't have on record the DNA of what would be the father, basically. The maternal DNA was human. The paternal was unknown humanoid. Interesting, isn't it? And this is everywhere. There's so much evidence of this. And some people, just can't face the fact that our history is complete bunk. Ancient race of white giants described in native legends from many tribes. And do you think there's any coincidence that the indigenous people have been wiped out? Do you think there's any coincidence? Because they have strong knowledge of the fact of the reality of this. And, they were passing it on for generations. And as you see, the Choctaw, the Comanches, the Navajo, the Manta, the Paiutes, it just goes on and on and on. On and on and on. They all have the same legends. All of them. As the seas rise, these ancient footprints are revealed. And there was some gigantic ancient footprints seen 6,000 feet down in the Pacific. And that also gets into the fact that some land that was once above water is now way below water, and vice versa as well. We've seen that. There are gigantic changes that come upon the earth from time to time. And so we are discovering a lot of things as we go through these changes. Again, these changes, what is it? Well, it's the apocalypse. It's the unveiling. Giants in history. That's a heck of a big bone right there. And if you guys are familiar with Mud Fossil, he gets into a lot of this as well. And I could tell you, doing the track across the American Southwest that I recently did, I swear there's a lot of mountains out there that look an awful lot like giant skulls and other body parts. And, these would be gigantic creatures. Gigantic. But we see the Book of Enoch tells us that giants were up to 1 mile high. That's something that we can't even comprehend. Is that, that's incomprehensible to us. But again, if some of these beings did not originate here, if they were on a planet the size of Jupiter, perhaps, how big would they be? And of course, a lot of that has to do with the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. Fossilized giants found in South Africa. Yes, tons of them. As you look at a shoulder blade over here, South Africa is really interesting as well. And this is over in North Carolina, and I did a video from this rock. And this is something that is credited to the Cherokee, but the Cherokee say they didn't do this, that this was here way before they got here. And so it's Judaculla rock, and Judaculla is a giant. And if you look down over here, this is his handprint, or what they say is his handprint, which is, it has more fingers than 5. And a lot of the giants were 6-fingered. And so very interesting, but most definitely across the globe in all different areas, we have these legends of giants. And we also have legends of the fallen angels, the Grigori, the angelic watchers. Now remember, the original interpretation of angel is simply messenger. A messenger. Our minds have been conditioned to think of angels in a certain way. And, there is what we call devas and asuras in the Vedic tradition. And the devas are a big class of beings. And they are basically nature beings that go from what we would call body elementals. There's elemental beings, which are basically composed of one of the elements, singularly, one of the elements. And in the case of a body elemental, that elemental, its purpose is just simply to work on your health and to maintain your health. And then they go on up the line all the way to what we would call, at the highest Devic realm, something like our modern thought of an angel, which is a very, very highly advanced spiritual being. They're thought of mostly as benevolent, although there are cases when they could be maybe not so benevolent, as in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, there again, we get into the judgment thing. And there's a lot of ways we could look at all these things. But the Grigori, right? Grigori, which comes from the Greek egregori, i.e. the watchers, are in one popular version a group of fallen angels described in the biblical Apocrypha, who mated with mortal women. Again, Genesis 6:4 and all. And so in the book of Enoch, they supposedly numbered 200, and it gives their names of the leaders as well. And if we go into the Italian witchcraft, which is pretty interesting, they were known as well, for one, stars. Very interesting as well. Many people are starting to say that stars aren't what they look like. And honestly, everything is intelligence. Everything is consciousness when we get down to it. So when we get down to it, it's all about different dimensions. And, yes, the planet itself, the Earth, is a living, breathing being. And we are living in one particular dimension of the Earth's being. The Earth, just like ourselves, are multidimensional beings. And so we have different dimensions to our existence. And these are all just different vibrational rates. And so, interestingly enough, the watchtowers, for those of you that have studied Wicca and some pagan traditions, there are 4 primary watchtowers that guard the corners. And this is also equated into the biblical traditions as the 4 archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. And so it's very, very interesting as well when we look at this. And again, remember that originally angel meant messenger. And now everything changes through time. See, a lot of the Christian beliefs come from when the Jews were actually in exile and they were exposed to some of the Persian beliefs. That's when Christianity really started to evolve, because when you look at the original Jewish Hebrew traditions, they had very, very, very different belief set than what we have now. So things have evolved and changed as they were exposed to other traditions. So when we look at Mithricism, for instance, and we look at more of that duality that you have with Ahriman, which is kind of like the devil, and Ahura Mazda, which is like the supreme God. So we see how things develop over time. So, to basically blindly believe what we were brought up with is not really doing oneself justice. We need to look deeper and look for the real origins. I mean, do you trust Noah? Do you trust NASA to give you the straight truth? And how many people believe that, those organizations are controlled by the powers that be? Well, again, question everything. We need to question everything, no matter how painful it is. And a lot of times it's just simply fear that keeps us from questioning. So this is Betty Andreasen's alien abduction case, and it was really, really interesting because in it, these little guys, as well as others, but these little guys tell her that they are the Watchers. Okay, wow, that's interesting. There's different types of beings that she sees. Some are very Nordic-like, and so they look a lot like what we would traditionally think angels look like, very humanoid Nordic. And there were different types that she saw, all doing different things. Very, very interesting case, but what always hit me was twofold. One, the fact that they called themselves the Watchers, that they were doing experiments monitoring the changes in her body due to everything that was happening on Earth. Perhaps they were monitoring the ascension process. They said also they were monitoring the level of toxins and pollutants and things along those lines. And what was also fascinating is the multidimensional experience, interdimensional experience, because they could basically walk through walls and just remove her astral body, her energy body, from a portion of her energy body, her astral body, from her physical, take her up and do experiments on her up in the ship and then put her back down. So they could actually materialize and dematerialize. And this is where we get into that. And of course, if you guys watch David Icke, he talks all about the interdimensional aspects of it. And it's in all of our history and our legends as well. So decoding the hidden ruins of southern Africa, discovering the true cradle of humankind. Yeah, and it's not the case where there was nothing before the Sumerians. That's not the case at all. We have leftover evidence of humanoid beings on the earth going back much, much longer than that. So you see here archaeological proof of advanced civilization on the southern tip of Africa that preceded Sumer in Egypt by 200,000 years. And you know what they were doing down there? They were mining. They were mining. And so there's mines down there that are 200,000 years old or older that are enormous and vast. So how were Homo sapiens sapiens doing that with the technology that we would have available in those times? Obviously, our history is bunk. It's totally distorted. Anunnaki history. The exact origins of the Sumerians are actually unknown. They entered Mesopotamia around 4000 BC. And it's pretty interesting stuff, really. This whole culture pops out of nowhere. And this culture is still dominating the planet. It hasn't stopped dominating the planet. It's just morphed. It's just changed forms. And one way they've done it is through our religions. They control us through the religions. They control us through the monetary system and our politics. So many people believe in the King James Bible, and this is King James who actually put it together. And so it was under his rule that the colonization of the Americas actually started from the English throne. And it's always been about conquest. It's always been about resources. It's no different today. Look at Iraq, look at Syria, look at all the different wars that we see going on, the thrust that is trying to push us into Iran as well. And again, it's never stopped. It's never stopped. 11 unusual facts about Constantine, the first Christian Roman emperor. And again, for those that don't question anything and totally trust in the King James Bible and totally trust in modern Christianity, which is just one form that was handpicked by this Roman emperor to be the acceptable form of Christianity, with every other book that didn't go along with what he came up with his Council of Nicaea. And, this was really all about saving an empire and expanding an empire. Because the other forms of Christianity were all about discovering God by going within. Gnosis, like the Gnostic vision, is in Gnosticism. You don't need to go to a priest. You don't need a papacy. You don't need to report to anybody. You get your knowledge, your gnosis, your understanding by a personal, intimate relationship with Source. And so there's no power in that. There's no money in that. There's no control in that. So then that had to be wiped out. And then what got instituted was one version. A version in which you could control people's minds and hearts much, much easier. So he had a vision and was told to conquer and by the sign of the cross. And again, when did Christ ever say to conquer in my name? Go out and conquer. He didn't even let his own disciples save his own life. And, as you look deeply into all this, it becomes really, really obvious. So who is this guy that actually brought about this form of Christianity, which has dominated the world for 1700 plus years? Well, he was divorced and remarried. So his first wife was Minervina, and he divorced her to marry a second wife, whose name was Fausta. Constantine killed his second wife in 326 after his first son Crispus from his first marriage. He had also his first son, Crispus, killed as well from his first marriage. And he also had his second wife, Fausta, killed. Both names were removed from public documentation. After Constantine had his second wife killed, he never married again until his death at age 65. And so, when you look into who this guy was, he was brutal. Obviously, killing his kid, killing his second wife himself, slaughtering all sorts of people brutally. This is the guy that founded the modern Christianity. So why would anybody want to trust in this guy? He was, held captive in his early life in the East. And there again, it goes into seeing the sign of the cross in the sky and go and conquer the world under this sign. And so he did legalize Christianity. He didn't likely convert for political reasons, as most history teachers will tell you. The demographics were against him at that time. But he did call the first Catholic an ecumenical council of Nicaea. And so when you think about it, this is really the guy that created, under his orders, the version of Christianity which has also led to the Inquisition, which has also led to spreading out, and we must convert all the natives. And if they won't convert, then we'll boil them alive or we'll kill them, because that is what has happened. And here you have 43 groundbreaking facts about Constantine the Great that we could look more in depth. So were the American Indians victims of genocide? Obviously they were. Obviously they were. By some, it's so interesting how they always try to reduce the number of people that were living here in the Americas. And so, they gave us numbers like, there was maybe 237,000 natives alive in 1900, and they don't want to really tell us the fact that there were tens of millions here. And so many of them, the vast majority of them, got exterminated. As and I don't want to blame, and I'm not blaming Europeans. It's the system. It's the empire that was the Sumerian Empire that morphed and has gone on to become the Roman Empire. And then it moved its center to England, as well as other places, other monarchies in Europe, and then moved out from there. And basically conquered North and South America under the guise of, spreading the one true religion to the natives. But in reality, it was the biggest genocide in human history, bigger than the one that occurred in Nazi Germany. And it was on American soil. 100 million Native Americans slaughtered and lost their homeland. And so why do we have Columbus Day? Why do we give celebration to this? It hits me as I'm out here in the West thinking of like an old show, How the West Was Won. Brutally and with a lot of blood. And what is it really all about? Think about it. And it's really hit me out with being out here about all the mining and the gold. And we go back to thinking about, where do we see this? Well, we see this all throughout the Sumerian legends of the Annunaki and the gods. They were all about the gold, all about the mining. And so the gold rush to California, again, it's all about resources. Same thing in Nevada. And it's pretty interesting when you look at some things here. Here you see Enki and Gibil mining. And the percentage of federally owned acreage by state. Look at Nevada. It's almost 85%. It's owned by the government. There's tons of gold here. There's tons of mining here. Interesting. So is this basically owned still by the Anunnaki? By those that gave us kingship from on high? By the ever morphing, ever changing dynasty that still perhaps goes on? As we see the symbols, we see the Roman. That's your Roman eagle. Interesting. Look at the eagle in a circle. Then we have the Sumerian winged disc. Roman eagle. Nazi Germany. Interesting. And the US. Interesting. Has anything really changed much? Has anything really changed much as we see the Anunnaki gods changing man to make him a better worker bee? But is that the real truth? As we look again at the winged disc, the man riding in the winged disc, and we see the slaves, necks roped together, hands tied behind their back. Interesting, interesting, interesting. That sure does look like a giant next to those humans. As we see the man in the heavens. Very curious. So we see the ziggurats and we see pyramids all over. Now, they really believed, the Sumerian people really believed that kings ruled by divine right. Each city-state had a god, goddess. Kings and priests acted on behalf of the gods. Are the rulers of this planet still acting on behalf of the gods? The gods were supposedly in their temple often, and sometimes they would go away, sometimes they would come back. Sometimes they would be gone for a long time, years, and then they would come back. And so we go back to what we had started with, looking at obviously the giants, right? The mighty men, men of renown. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of the Anunnaki, perhaps. What do you think? It looks like this all goes together pretty clearly. And just, it's really just the outward semblance that has changed. Everything is still basically the same. Corporations now run the world. Institutions. We know, we recognize all these things. They control through our religion, they control through politics, they control through the monetary system. And so many people can't even think past the fact that there couldn't be anything but either capitalism or communism. There could be no other system. Maybe we could just simply barter and trade and get along like that. Maybe we could actually work together in unity and in harmony. Maybe that's what we would do if we weren't under the influence of these beings and the ones that basically pull the strings. As we look at the all-seeing eye of the Watchers, the Grigori, the Nephilim. All very interesting, my friends. So as we wake up in this time, because this is the apocalypse and all this is being, shown to be true, the fact that so many people's belief systems are being crashed, and that is tough to deal with. But many people are waking up, many people are evolving, many people are seeing how things have been portrayed and played. And so we are the many. And we also have power in us. We have so much power to manifest a positive reality once we recognize that we've been played. And another one of my favorites is the Tower of Babel. Come. Look at what they're doing. Humanity is united. The people are as one. There's no telling what they could do. They could be just like us. Come, let us go down there and scatter them. And let us confuse their language so that we could basically maintain control, tell them what to believe, tell them how to act. And that way, the few control the many. But that time is over, and we are waking up, and we will band together. We need to band together. We need to recognize the divine spark within us and throw away the thought of original sin because we didn't obey the slave masters. Of course, they want you to feel that you are less than, but you're not. The same spark of divinity is in you. And we have tremendous co-creative power. And once we recognize that, there's no stopping the change. And they recognize that. They know that. So they don't want us to recognize the divinity that lies within, the power that lies within. So they will throw any sort of thing they can at you to keep you in fear, to keep you divided, to keep you, us, from banding together and throwing off the yoke of this system that has been upon us for at least 6,000 years. So my friends, I look forward to your comments. As always, like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for your support in every way. Stay safe, God bless, and namaste.